Can anyone beat Carlos Alcaraz? Just too good.
Thank God for Carlos Alcaraz. At this age, I've never seen a player this good, this complete.
Typically, the debate about the greatest of all time is reserved for the final curtain call of a career. You look at the Trinity, Roger, Rafa, and Novak. You wait until the Grand Slam tally is final, the rivalries are settled, and decades of supremacy make the verdict impossible to deny. That was the rule for the Big Three. You bought your ticket to that conversation by surviving the grind long enough to demand a seat. Carlos Alcaraz is merely 22 years old, and the debate is already raging. Good Lord, how do we handle this? The verdict isn't just coming from fans in the comment section, but from the titans inside the sport who know exactly what they are witnessing. And I am hoping they keep their eyes fixed on Carlos. Djokovic, the giant he just toppled in a slam final, branded the performance as historic and legendary. He admitted, point blank, that Alcaraz is one of the most formidable competitors he has ever faced in his entire career. Legends like McEnroe and the experts aren't holding back their praise either. With a 12-0 undefeated start to 2026, including the youngest career Grand Slam in history, the players themselves are beginning to confess what Alcaraz actually looks like from across the net. Out of nowhere comes this force from Spain, Carlos Alcaraz, sitting on the world #1 throne. So, is the king of 2026 already the king of all time? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because that is exactly the rabbit hole we are diving into today. Let's start with the semifinal, because while the final gets the glory, the semifinal told the real story. January 30th, Melbourne. Alcaraz versus Zverev. 5 hours and 27 minutes of warfare. The longest Australian Open semifinal ever recorded in the tournament's history. Alcaraz lost the opener and was dragged to every corner of the arena by a player who has been pounding on the door of a Grand Slam for years and finally looked ready to kick it down. But he didn't. Alcaraz unlocked something in the third set, carried that momentum through the fourth, and slammed the door in the fifth. By the time it was over, he had stolen a victory that, by all logic, he had no business winning given the start. That matters because the GOAT conversation isn't just about clean wins. It is about winning when you are beaten. It is about finding answers in the fifth hour of a marathon with a major final looming just 2 days later. The capacity to absorb a test that's severe and return the following week at the same elite level is what separates the great from the generational. Alcaraz did exactly that, and then repeated the feat on the biggest stage the tournament offers. Novak Djokovic, 10 Australian Open titles, 10 finals, 0 losses. The most terrifying record of dominance at a single venue that men's tennis has ever produced. Alcaraz dropped the first set 2-6 and looked for a moment like the occasion might crush him. It didn't. He swept the next three, 6-2, 6-3, 7-5. And when the final ball struck the court, Djokovic's perfect Melbourne record was history, and Alcaraz stood alone as the youngest man to complete the career Grand Slam at 22 years, 8 months, and 27 days, eclipsing Rafael Nadal's previous milestone. 3 weeks later, he was back at work in Doha. A tiebreak against Karen Khachanov in the quarterfinals served as a useful reminder that he is not invincible. The level needed to beat him exists. It is just rarely reached. He survived that match and then walked into the final against Arthur Fils, dismantling him in 50 minutes, 6-2, 6-1. 12 wins from 12 matches to open the season. No losses. The career Grand Slam remains the ultimate test of versatility in men's tennis. It requires conquering the clay, the grass, and the hard courts. 3 surfaces built around completely different physical profiles, tactical playbooks, and mental frameworks. Clay is a war of attrition, rewarding patience and heavy spin across 2 grinding weeks where outlasting the opponent matters as much as outplaying them. Grass is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. It demands explosive serving, flat ball striking, and points that are over before a rally truly begins, where a millisecond of hesitation is enough to lose the point. Hard courts sit between both, demanding the kind of adaptability that holds up across the longest stretch of the calendar, where the field is deepest and margins are razor-thin. Only 8 men in the entire history of professional tennis had completed this gauntlet before January 2026. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, Andre Agassi, Jimmy Connors, Roy Emerson, Rod Laver, Fred Perry. This is not a list of good tennis players. It is the short list of the sport's most complete athletes across the Open era and beyond. Men whose games were capable of triumphing on surfaces with entirely conflicting demands. Alcaraz stands alone as the 9th man to scale this mountain, but here is the kicker. He is the youngest to ever reach the summit. Think about Rafael Nadal, the Titan with 22 majors, a man engraved on the Mount Rushmore of tennis. He did not lock in the full set until he was 24. Carlos beat that clock by almost 2 full years, striking while his peers are still figuring out whether they prefer grass or clay. Now, this does not hand him the crown of greatest ever just yet. What it proves is that the terrifying physical and technical arsenal needed for that debate is fully operational at an age when most pros are still laying the bricks. Every legend needs a bedrock to stand on. And the Spaniard has poured the concrete. Just 48 hours after falling in that final, Novak Djokovic took the mic and branded Alcaraz's run with 2 heavy words: historic and legendary. Now, understand that Novak is not exactly famous for handing out free compliments to the guys trying to take his lunch money. He has spent 15 years in the Shark Tank, surviving the most brutal era this sport has ever seen, guarding his legacy like a hawk. In that presser, he could have played it safe, nodded at the achievement, without putting a halo on the kid's head. But he didn't. He went into the vault and pulled out the gold standard adjectives. That isn't just sportsmanship. That is a ruling from the judge, jury, and executioner who spent a decade becoming the measuring stick, saw his own level matched in the flesh, and simply spoke the only truth that fit the moment. You have legends like McEnroe and Isner singing from the same hymn sheet, but let's pause for a reality check. The internet is awash with viral quotes and flashy sound bites that are about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Hard to track, hard to trust. But what you can take to the bank is the sheer gravity of the words being used by the people who know. The titans of the game aren't using nickel and dime vocabulary to describe Alcaraz's 2026 campaign. They are cashing in the big checks. Grand Slam winners don't throw around terms like historic for a 22-year-old, unless they feel it in their bones. That reverence coming from inside the locker room, not the cheap seats, tells a story that statistics simply cannot capture. When your enemies start talking about your legacy while you are barely old enough to rent a car, the paradigm has already shifted, regardless of what the Wikipedia page says. But we don't sell smoke here without checking for fire. So let's look at the flip side, because it demands respect. Jannik Sinner isn't going anywhere. We are talking world number 2, a man with multiple majors in his bag. His game is evolving into a weapon that can draw blood on clay, grass, or hard court. He is a nemesis in the purest sense, not a speed bump, not a placeholder, but a warrior who forces Carlos to empty the tank just to survive. Their collisions over the next 10 years will be the blockbuster movie of this generation, and nobody knows how the script ends yet. If 2 or 3 points bounce the other way in Melbourne, we are having a completely different discussion right now. Razor-thin margins don't vanish just because Carlos snatched the trophy. However, the biggest elephant in the room is endurance. Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic didn't just win once. They held the throne for 15 years, stacking up 20-plus slams while fending off wave after wave of new blood. Novak grabbed his first hardware at 20, but the greatest of all-time chatter didn't really heat up until a decade later, around title number 8 or 9. Carlos has been the king of the hill for 2 years. 2 spectacular years, absolutely, but still just 2. We haven't seen back-to-back major victories yet. The calendar year sweep is still a dream, and the resume is still short enough that only the grind of time can bridge the canyon between best of right now and best there ever was. I'm not trying to rain on the parade, these are just the cold, hard requirements for entrance into the pantheon. But here is the wrinkle that the skeptics are missing: the sheer velocity of his ascent. When Federer was 22, he had 1 solitary slam. It was the spark of a grass court empire, sure, but it was just a spark. At that same age, Nadal was the prince of clay, but he was still 2 years shy of completing the full puzzle. Djokovic was even further in the rearview mirror at 22-1 title, and years away from the hard-court tyranny that would eventually force his way into history. Don't get me wrong, they were all freaks of nature back then. But what Alcaraz has constructed by 22 is alien. 7 majors and the career Grand Slam completed faster than any human in history, plus kicking off the season by dismantling the all-time record holder on the big stage. Taking the crown on a court where the king supposedly couldn't be killed. He isn't just ahead of schedule. He is writing a timeline that didn't exist until he picked up a racket, and regarding the competition debate, that actually strengthens his case. Carlos isn't beating up on nobodies. He's slaying Dragon's Djokovic in a final, surviving a 5-hour war with Zverev in the semis, battling Sinner at the absolute peak of the sport. The quality of the villain is what makes the hero, and that is what gives these trophies their weight. The opponent is irrelevant. The sheer dominance continues to roll on, match after match. Look, at 22 years old, Crowning Alcaraz, the eternal king, is premature, and anyone selling that story is skipping the hard part. Yet, he has undeniably proven that the conversation has moved from fantasy to fact. The proof isn't vague anymore, and the giants of the sport are finally voicing exactly what they are seeing on the court. We are standing on entirely new ground compared to the state of play just 12 months back. This isn't media hype or crowd noise. This shift is organic, commanded by the respect of the players trying to survive against him. The next war kicks off at Indian Wells on March 4th, featuring both Alcaraz and Sinner in the lineup. Let us hear it below. Is the hype train moving too fast, or is the evidence rock solid? Tap subscribe and hit the bell, because we will be breaking down every fraction of this journey.